All right, everybody, we got another very special guest for you all. I want everyone to welcome to the show Brian Schirmer. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, sir. It's great to be here.
Hey, glad you could be here. Glad you're caffeinated, ready to chat with us.
Oh, indeed.
I had the pleasure of reading both issues of Quest Aside last week, so we got to talk about that. But before we get into it, and Chris has got the beautiful physical copy there, also available. Let's hear your origin story, Brian. Where did it all start as far as like writing comics and stuff for you?
As far as writing comics goes, it was probably a little over 10 years ago. I've been writing my entire life in one form or another. And a little over a decade ago, I had a chance meeting with two people that subsequently became close friends. One of them was a guy named Dan Cooney, who was teaching comics, all aspects of it, at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. And he was a guy who was supplementing his income with independently published comics. I mean, he had a booth at San Diego every year, and was just, shucking and jiving and doing his thing. And I'd never really thought about comics writing being a job. I knew it was. I'd read comics my entire life. I knew who people were, but I never really thought about it. I was like, oh, that's an actual, I hadn't thought about it in those terms. And then very shortly thereafter, through a mutual friend, wound up having lunch with somebody named Kelly Sue DeConnick. And we sat and had a chat a little bit. I will try to keep that to a minimum, but it happened.
Okay.
So we had a chat over lunch because she was in town here. I live in San Francisco at present. She was in town with Matt for a show back when they still had comic conventions here in San Francisco. Subtweet. And we had lunch, and again, it was me thinking, it's like, oh, here's another person that is not only, bringing in some supplemental income, but she and her husband are both, this is their job. They're making a living doing this. And I thought, all right. I've tried writing most any other thing under the sun. Let's give comics a shot. And let's see, how lengthy do we want to make this? So I did a with some friends and coworkers. We put together a little self-published comic that was just short stories that I wrote. That we wound up, selling at WonderCon. I think the following year. I think it moved that quickly. And then, so what really leapfrogged me into doing it on the regular was, I want to say that same year, San Diego Comic-Con rolls around. And in advance, I'm thinking about, okay, well, who do I talk to about getting work? And this small publishing company, honestly, and I feel terrible, I always forget the name of it because A, it's been 10 years, B, the company still exists but never really took off. Anyway, they advertised that they were going to have a dedicated booth, and it was going to be nothing but portfolio reviews the entirety of San Diego Comic-Con. And they're saying, oh, we want to see this from, illustrators, we want to see this from colorists. And then I read a thing about writers, and they say, oh, hey, we want to check out, your scripts. And it needs to be, this many pages. It needs to be with an established character, not a creator-owned one, which for those that don't know, that is extremely rare that a publisher wants to see you, do a script for Captain America or Shazam or anything.
Right.
And I found out about this less than a week before Comic-Con. And so I had, I think, 2 days to come up with something and write what I want to say was like a 6-page script. And I wound up writing a 5 or 6 page script for a Batman short that was basically Batman by way of Fight Club in like 5 or 6 pages. And I go to Comic-Con. I've got my script. I have my appointed time where I'm going to be meeting the publisher and editor in chief. And I get there, and I'm sitting outside. This was actually up near where they have the signings at Comic-Con, not down on the main floor. And so there's all these chairs. And so there's maybe 15, 20 people waiting to meet with this guy, waiting for their appointed time. And I look around, and every single one of them has a huge-ass portfolio. And I'm thinking, these guys are all artists or colorists or maybe inkers. I am the only writer. And so I pull out my phone, and I go back, and I check the their website again, and sure enough, I misread the damn thing, and it said, "Writers, here's what we want from you. Please do not bring this to San Diego Comic-Con. Please only submit through our website." And
Oh
I
no.
read that, and I'm like, "Oh shit!" And 5 minutes later, it's my turn, and he calls me up. And I'm like, "Ah, fuck it." I go up there, and
We'll do it live.
I shake his hand, and I tell him, "Look, I totally screwed up. I totally misread this, and here's this is what happened." And we had a good laugh. And he said, "Look, I'm not going to dock you for this. I'll take the script. I'll read it. I'll read it. I'll let you know what I think." I'm like, "Cool, thank you. Sorry for the confusion." So no problem. And maybe a month later, I'm at a shopping for clothes or something, and my phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's the editor/publisher of this little publisher, and says, "I read your script. I really like it. Let's talk again in a couple weeks, and why don't you come up with some ideas to pitch me for a graphic novel?" And yeah, and so the good news is, a couple weeks later, I pitched him a couple ideas. He really liked one. I wound up scripting like a 80-90 page graphic novel, sent it in. They tried out a few artists, and then it just, nothing. Then nothing happened. It just died out.
Yeah.
So I did that. On the one hand, I did that for no money. On the other hand, it got me even more scripting experience, which was cool.
Yeah.
And I will skip over bits and pieces here. It did lead to me doing my first self-published books, which then led to getting my first book at Image, which then got me to Vault, which leads us to Quest Aside and here today.
Okay. Wow. So it's a really small publisher, like would it be like Golden Apple Comics or something like that? I think that's one that does publishing. Or
I might remember the name, but I also I don't want to shit talk somebody that's still doing good work.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Also I don't want to misname the company and name the book.
Yeah. I think it's interesting though, going from like, oh, you wrote this 6-page story about Batman. Okay, now give me a 90-page script about something like an idea that you have. Yeah, your own idea. Yeah, that's a pretty big jump.
Right. And I mean, looking back at it now, it's like, that's a really weird way of doing business.
Yeah,
but
you did a really solid 6-page Batman story. Now give me your own idea. Yeah,
right. Yeah. Exactly.
That's cool though.
It's funny though, but that's I know Mad Cave Studios does it that way. And
really?
They've gotten if you've ever read Nottingham, that's how that book came about. Mm-hmm. So, to my knowledge of what I've heard behind the scenes, yeah,
it's like a writing contest almost, right?
They do like a talent search every year, and they get new writers, artists, so on and so forth. And that was one of the things that came out of it, was that book, which ended up being a really great book if you haven't read it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about a great book, Quest Aside, and Vault Comics. So you got into Vault. Let's talk about how did that come about with Quest Aside at Vault? Where did that all start?
I was fortunate enough that was it 5 years ago, 6 years ago? Vault did their very first show, which was Emerald City Comic Con in whatever year that was, 5-6 years ago. And they were literally tabling right behind us. My buddy Jason McNamara and I were sharing a table, and we were on the end, and right behind us were Adrian Wassel, I want to say Damien, his brother, who's the publisher, and Tim Daniel were all back there. And my buddy Jason knew Tim, and so we got chatting, and then I got started talking with Adrian and Damien, found out what they were literally just starting out. I think they had their very first titles. Actually, I know they had only their very first titles at the time. And we just kept in touch, right? And we'd see each other at shows, and I don't think I had an invitation to pitch, but I didn't really have anything that I felt like throwing that way. But every time we met up, it was kind of like, okay, well, one of these days we're gonna work on something. And I had jumping a couple years ago now, I had pitched them on a kind of a 12 issues fantasy sci-fi series, and we talked about it for a good long time. We did some revisions, and eventually got to the point where they had other books in the pipeline that were a bit similar to what I was doing, and so they said, well, can't really do this now. Let's hold on to this. maybe we try something a little tighter, a little either shorter, or something that can become an ongoing. And these are a couple of the subgenres that we're looking for these days. And one of them at the time was fantasy. A couple years ago, I'm talking to Adrian. He says everybody is knowing us now as doing sci-fi, and this is even before they started getting into horror. Right. And he says no one's pitching me on no one's pitching me on fantasy. I'm like, well, I have this idea that's been rolling around in my head, and I gave him the gentle pitch of Quest Aside, which is basically like high fantasy Cheers.
Yeah,
and
exactly, said, that's what it is. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, that sounds kind of cool. Send me something. Write up something, send it to me." And I did, and we knocked it back and forth for a few months, and eventually got it to a point where where I was implementing the feedback that Adrian was giving me, and he was liking what he was seeing, and we got to a point where it's like, yeah, I like this. Let's move forward and let's start looking for an artist. And that was I want to say early 2021. So it was around January, February 2021, where we started looking at artists. And I put together a list of a few people. He put together a list of a few people, and we both worked through them. And most everyone was pretty good. Or you could see it's like, oh, this person might work, but it's still just we still hadn't found someone that was resonating for us both. Yeah. And what happened was I want to say April of last year, Twitter had one of their semi-annual portfolio days.
Oh, and I didn't know they did that.
Oh yeah, a few times a year there'll be I don't know who decrees it or if anyone does at this point.
Yeah,
I'm going to put my portfolio on there, put #portfolio day, and woo.
Okay, yeah.
So there had been a day back in April of last year, and I was just going through the hashtag and came upon this one person's work and thought, she's doing looking at her basic portfolio. She does fantasy. She does great action. She does a variety of body types. Not every character looks the same. Yeah, I'll send this to Adrian and say, what do you think of? And he wrote back and said, yeah, absolutely. If she's interested, and then he reached out, and fortunately she was on board. And what I'm talking about is her name is Elena Gogu. And the reason I even know how to pronounce her last name is she was kind enough to lay it out the other day on social media somewhere. It says it's like Grogu but without the R.
Oh, okay. There you go. No, yeah.
And and that's how we got together. And that's then awesome. I started working we got a contract and started working on scripts right then.
So most people do a fantasy book and they think, I want to do my Lord of the Rings, my high fantasy. Why did you want to set it in a bar?
So
it's awesome. It's awesome that you did, but
there's a fun origin story for that as well, which again is another. I don't want it to sound like I only go to Emerald City, but it was another Emerald City Comic Con, and this was probably 2019, I guess. So about 3 years ago, and I was on a panel for Fair Lady. Fair Lady had either just started or was just about to start over at Image, and I was on a panel with Kieran more name dropping. Kieran Gillen, Mags Visaggio, Daniel Barnes, who wrote the Black Mage over at Oni, and we were just on this fantasy panel and talking about writing and art and everything associated with it and where ideas come from. And at some point, we just started en masse, just started on this notion of why is there never a fantasy story that's just set in the Prancing Pony, or in a pub. And so, different ideas started getting thrown around about what that would look like. And it was, no one had any designs on this whatsoever. But it stuck with me when it was over and thinking, it's like, wow, that's actually a really cool idea. It's a simple sell. It's an easy pitch. I mean, if anybody knows Cheers, you say fantasy Cheers and you're done. And if they don't know it, you could say, well, it's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, or it's Always Sunny in Waterdeep,
Water. Yeah. There you go. Exactly. That's awesome.
And from my experience, it's the ideas that that crop up that just don't go away over a period of time that turn out to be the ones that bear any fruit. And that was something I held on to for a while. And then, when I was having the meetings with Adrian and he asked about a fantasy pitch, and I said, well, what about this? And that's what stuck. And thankfully, none of those people are coming to me for residuals.
When I saw on, I can't remember if it was Vault that originally said it, but I know it's on the back of the book. It's Always Sunny in the Realm, and I was like, sold. You got me right there.
Awesome.
I'm in.
It's Always Sunny in the Realm.
Cards on the Table. That was Adrian Wassel, the editor-in-chief. That was his contribution.
That's very cool.
His only contribution to the book was coming up with the temporary elevator pitch. No, that's
yeah. He'd love to hear that. And I think it's a great idea. But I mean, just for our listeners and stuff, that it revolves around a main character that's a retired adventurer, pretty much, right?
Yeah. It's basically about this guy named Barrow, who was he was basically his realm's equivalent of like Aragorn. Running around, kicking ass, slaying dragons, toppling liches, and freeing the peoples. But instead of becoming the king, or ultimately dying on one last crusade, he goes for one last crusade, banks all the money, and retires. He's the one. I've always really dug the classic stories. It's a western or anything where it's somebody going or a crime story, right, where somebody's going out for one last score or one last ride. And I figured you never see that. That's another thing you never see in fantasy, is somebody who has done their last quest, and that's we pick up after that. We figure out what happens after the fact, and after the fact, he basically becomes like Sam Malone in Cheers, where instead of being the one-time baseball great, he's the one-time great defender of the realm who now runs a bar and serves up drinks to the new heroes and heroines.
Yeah. And there's a little more weight to it, though, because of each individual character in the there's a couple layers to the story, I'd say, because you have the bar, right, and it's really interesting with all the characters. Like the undead chef, I love that. That's probably one of my favorites.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. Ray.
Everybody loves Ray.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously, I think he is on. Yeah. I think he might be on every single cover for issue 1, and there were 8 or 9 variants, and he is featured on every single one. In some cases, he gets a lot of love.
Yeah,
justly so.
Well, there's your one-shot side story right there.
Yeah, there you go. The Ray one-shot.
Oh, dude, if they would greenlight that, I would write that in a heartbeat. I would demand extra pages.
Yeah, that's do it up. But then there's the extra added lore of, okay, something happened. He has a relationship with the king. The king is an asshole. He's taxing everybody harder than usual and stuff like that. So you've added a little more to the story too, though. So you're painting a kind of a bigger picture there too, right?
Yeah, I didn't want as much as I can say it's fantasy cheers. I didn't want to write fantasy cheers. I didn't want it to just be about gags and will they or won't they? The fantasy equivalent of Sam and Diane. I needed more of a conflict, to my mind, to sustain it, and I wanted the series to be somewhat episodic. So you've got different characters and guest stars, if you will, who come in each issue who are patrons. But it needed a spine. It needed something to carry it through, and I wanted it to be something more weighty. And the notion that the king is going to shut this place down and reveal that only to Barrow, our tavern owner and protagonist, and he's the only one that knows this is going to happen, and he is the one who is then struggling with this throughout our first arc, and so you get more weight with that as opposed to it just be joke, and it allowed a lot of opportunity for me to play with heavier themes, but not making it a dark and dreary tale, which I didn't want to do either, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to spoil too much, but I also like anyone, and I'm sure this is a lot of our audience because Mike and I are these people, but anyone that's played D&D knows with like
everyone should be like us.
the fantasy stuff and and curses and stuff like that, and you play with those as well in like humorous ways. Like I said, I don't want to spoil the one moment in issue 2, but like that kind of stuff really hits hard with me too when they happen, because I can just picture it in a D&D
environment
setting like that happening and being kind of a joke that we play off. But then like this person now has to deal with it for the rest of his life.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's funny for Chris because his character was the one in D&D. I would just sit at the bar to drink the whole night away. But if he had a curse where he wouldn't be able to get drunk, I think it would just he would go insane.
Yeah, I think one of the I don't remember how early in the process it was, but coming up with the notion that not only would Barrow have to be, dealing with trying to resolve this issue of the king threatening to buy the place out from under him, but also contending with ostensibly more curses than any other person known to exist, was just stupid fun. And we get to reveal more and more of them as the story goes on, and you just see how many God, I hate this, disabilities, I hate to say, that he has to contend with on top of trying to keep his quote unquote family together. It makes every scene that I write with him seem to have a bit more meat to it.
Yeah, and I like you said family there, because that's another dynamic too. Is like you said you have special guests coming into the tavern, and like adventurers that have fought with him and stuff, and they're like, "You were so great, and everything was so great." And he's like, "Well, this is my family now," and they almost kind of like disrespect him for that. you know, like, this is your family now. Like, you killed dragons beside me and all this stuff, but like now you've thrown everything away for these people in a tavern. So I do like that whole dynamic too.
Cool, thank you. I'm not really giving anything. I don't really feel I'm giving anything away by saying this, but it was most stuff I write ultimately turns out to be a process of discovery, and I don't think I'm alone in experiencing that. But if the story is ultimately about anything, it's about the found families and the families we make, and the fact that sometimes you may be best friends with somebody or a group of people, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to last forever. You will grow apart, things will happen, people change, especially over time and distance, and ultimately what one might learn by the end of this first arc is that that's okay. That's a part of life. People change, people grow apart, and you get new friends, and you may build new families.
Life lessons at the tavern.
Exactly.
And I did catch the first story arc part there. So can we talk about the structure of the story? What's your plan overall for this? I mean, obviously, how does Vault feel? I think you guys have had a pretty popular book here, right? So you have one planned story arc, and
short answer, yes. Long answer, as with virtually everything at pretty much every publisher these days, it is an ongoing until it's not.
Okay.
We have had initial discussions about the next arc. We are not in production yet. I think the big tell is going to be as we record this, tomorrow is going to be Final Order Cutoff FOC for our third issue, and I think those numbers are really going to tell, are basically going to tell Vault if we're good to keep going. So I for myself plan to have a chat with them in a couple weeks once they've got the final numbers in, and see where we're going. And I'd like to continue. I definitely have plans for all of the characters. Worst case scenario, if the support just isn't there, I think we'll be sitting with a very solid miniseries that will hold up and be a nice little perennial favorite.
Okay.
So for that first arc, are we talking about 5 issues, 6 issues?
Yeah, 5 issues.
Okay, good. Yeah.
And I should point out that so the 5th issue will drop in September, but then the trade, for anybody out there listening, watching, who is a trade waiter, be advised it's not dropping until March.
Oh wow!
We have a long lead time for that night, which I think is becoming the norm for Vault, in part because I can't remember who it is, but their trade distribution is through a book publisher, as many comic publishers are these days, and so they need a substantial amount of lead time for the bookstores as opposed to comic shops.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
I know this is far flung. You said it's in March, but has there been any talks about what the trade's going to look like, or if you're going to do like a hardcover or anything?
We have not had that level of discussion yet. I would love to have a hardcover. I would love for us to have process pages in the back and that sort of thing. I'm always a fan of that stuff. But that's a little far afield at this point.
Yeah, in my head, I'm hoping, because this will get me to double dip. I think it was Barbaric. That did that nice hardcover with that looks up like a fantasy book.
Yeah,
and I double dipped on that too, because I was like, that's just too nice not to get.
Yep.
I suspect I will. I'm going to give this as feedback to them and say, hey, I'm talking to people and they really want there to be serious back matter in the trade, and I heard the term double dipping. So
this guy, he's willing to buy a second one if we make it for him.
No, I'll say, hey, I got this guy who I gave him free PDFs, and he went and bought an issue, and then he's talking about buying the book. So let's let's make that happen. I will definitely be having that discussion. If for some reason they don't want to do it, if they want to keep it an affordable, low cost trade, then I will probably be easily persuaded to just put process stuff up on social media or the interwebs for free, because I don't want to. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff there, and it'd be just kind of sad for it to just only be seen by half a dozen people.
Yeah. Understand.
And that's great stuff for people coming up that want to learn how to make comics
100%.
Or aspire to do it. Like, I used to read I think it was Bendis who did it a lot. I used to read the scripts in the back so I could learn how to write scripts.
Yeah, it's always helpful for people that want to try it out for themselves.
Yeah.
Brian, that's awesome. So I'm pumped to read the rest of the first story arc. So I'm hoping that all 5 issues are being published, and best of luck with that.
Thanks, sir.
Is there anything else you want to talk about today, or anywhere we can send our listeners to pick up the book if they're looking to get them?
As cliche as it sounds, the irons I have in the fire are not the types of things that I can as yet reveal and discuss. Yada yada yada.
Understood.
Primarily, I'm at Brian Schirmer on Twitter, and annoyingly, I am at Brian_Schirmer on Instagram. Yeah, okay. It's a pain in the ass. That's what happens when I've been on Twitter for over a decade, and I jumped onto Instagram maybe 3 years ago. So so it goes. I have a website, but dear God, it is. I haven't updated it in probably 3 years. Maybe I'll get on that.
There you go.
But yeah, that's pretty much the easiest places to locate me. While I will not be tabling there, my wife and I will be at San Diego Comic-Con for the first time in obviously years next month.
Nice.
Which should be cool. And I have every reason to suspect that I'll be on at least one panel for Vault. They have not finalized that yet, but I'm given that Quest Aside is happening, and people seem to like it, I suspect they'll trot me out, which I always enjoy. And then if you've got anybody listening across the pond, the next show that we are definitely doing is Thought Bubble. Thought Bubble in the UK in November. So we are getting. My wife is the comics writer Danny Coleman. She and I will be co-tabling as guests at Thought Bubble in early mid-November. I can't remember the dates, but
cool.
It's a good time.
That's exciting. Over in Europe for that, and there you go.
Yeah, we did it once before. I want to say probably 20. I think it was 2019. It was the last show we did before. Oh, the world changed and we had lockdown and everything. And it's a fantastic time.
Awesome. Well, best of luck with all that.
Yeah, so everyone out there, Quest Side issue 2 hit comic shelves last week. So run to your local comic shop, see if they still got copies. And issue 3 should be out next month. But I'll have links down below. If you do not have a local comic shop, I'll put links to not only Brian's website, but either Vault's web store, or if I have no other choice, the Amazon web store, so you can pick up a copy yourself. So make sure everybody go follow Brian, and thanks again for taking the time and coming talking to us, man. And I'm loving the book so far, so I look forward. Hopefully it's a huge hit and it lasts 100 more issues, because it's been just a blast so far.
Yeah, same here.
Thank you.